to the Healing Half. My name is Mickey Spear. I am a grief author, musician, and talk show host. And we get to spend every Tuesday night together where we get to spend half an hour or less leaning in to how we can heal our own wounds as well as help others with theirs and learn how can we love people better and be better community members for situations we just don't understand. And with tonight's extremely amazing topic, where my wonderful guest, Hanna with no H, is on to talk about her story with her mom and substance abuse. And I just cannot wait to dive in. So we will get to Hanna in just 1 second. And I can't wait for you to meet her and her bundle of joy and just all of her wisdom that she's got to share with us tonight. But in case we haven't met before, welcome. Like I said, my name's Mickey, but my mom passed away when I was 13 years old from cancer. I spent the better part of a decade pretending I was fine, truly buying into that lie that I didn't need any help, that crying was kind of like a weakness thing, and that I really needed to not cry and be strong and just kind of push through because I was a normal 13-year-old, which of course I was not a normal 13-year-old, but I definitely sure tried to be, and that never works. You can't strong arm your way through grief, right? So eventually, all these things started to crumble around me and I was an emotional mess and I couldn't figure out what was going on. And thankfully I figured out it was just a lot of unprocessed grief. So now, praise the good Lord, I've been through lots of counseling, still I am in counseling, lots of books, lots of support groups like the one that Hannah and I met at, which is so wonderful. And I can truly say on the other side of processing and like leaning into those hard questions and emotions and everything, it is so much better on the other side. Not that we're ever over grief, but leaning into those hard emotions is what my mantra is. So that's what this whole show is about, is just giving us a spot to learn how to help ourselves and help others lean into those tough things and know how to support ourselves and support others. So if you are watching, whether live or as a replay, give Hannah and I a hello in the comments. We will absolutely be going able to go back through, take a peek at them. We'd love to know that you are here. And if you have questions or comments as either of us are talking, please let us know because we would love to make sure we hear from you and then of course be able to go back through and answer them if we don't get to them during our live portion. Before I bring Hannah on, my door is open back there, which I'm just noticing now, and my dog's favorite toy is right there. So we might have a little bit of back and forth behind me in case you get. We might get a third guest appearance tonight with Mr. Cash. So sorry about that. But really quick, the show, as you guys know, is in transition, which is really fun. We're going to be doing live shows up until the end of the year. Where our final big show, this big finale, is going to be kind of this joint thing where it's going to be my last live show like this, as well as a grace and space event. And I'm going to be telling you all about that more here coming up. I think next week I'll dive deeper. But if you want to, again, please make sure you're on my email list. It's www.mickeysphere.com. Jump on it because that's where I'm going to be communicating most of the stuff. But it's going to be a free event. But I would love to know ahead of time if you want to be there. We'll have a candle lighting ceremony where we're going to bring up photos of people from the audience that they have lost and just really be able to have this nice come together time for the holidays to be able to honor our loved one. And as I talked about, have space for ourselves and for our loss so we can connect to that kind of before all the big family gatherings come together to just hopefully lighten our grief load a little bit. So again, head to my website, make sure you're on my email list. We're going to be talking a lot more about that. That's coming up in a couple weeks in December, but that'll be here before we know it. And I would love for you to be there. And you might be saying, well, Mickey, what's happening to the show after that? It's going to be turning, starting the first of the year into a podcast. So if you're watching this on Facebook or YouTube, you're not getting rid of me. I promise I will still be on often to play my music, give you guys updates. But as far as the weekly show on Tuesday night goes, that is going to be turning into a podcast. So just know we have so many good things up around the corner, lots of music coming out. I've got a new song called Dance Barefoot Either Way that I collaborated with my sister on. It's a pop song, it's fun, and I'll actually be talking about that a little more next week too. But just know you're not getting rid of me. The show's just in a little bit of a transition. So thank you again if you have been watching the show live. Truly, I am so honored and I am so grateful. And I wish I could just give you a big hug in person, but since it's virtual, a virtual hug for all the support you've given me. I really hope that you continue with me on this journey as we hopefully get to reach more people. And my book releases in Q1 of 2022, and it's going to be called Griefs a Beach. So you're going to have to stick with me if you want to hear all about Griefs a Beach. But that's for 2022. Let's keep going with this show while we've got it. Let's bring on the wonderful Hannah Finnegan. Hannah, thank you so very much for joining us tonight.
Hello, thank you for having me.
Oh,
So I am Hannah. And I lost my mom when I was 20. I was less than 3 weeks away from turning 21. And then my mom actually passed away 3 days after her 51st birthday. So her birthday was February 23rd, and she passed away February 26th of 2017. So we are going on almost 5 years of her being gone. And she passed away from an accidental drug overdose. And, of course, I'm going to get more into that, but that's kind of just the basis of my story.
well, thank you so much for sharing. I love that photo of you too. That is so precious, and I
Mm-hmm.
appreciate you sharing that with our audience today. So Hannah, I'm
Mm-hmm.
first and foremost so sorry for your loss. I mean, we met at a motherless daughters group, so I
Yep.
hate that we have that in common, but I love that we got to meet each other also through that. It's such a strange sense of community that, again, not everybody understands what it's like to kind of lose your mom at a young age, and it's never easy at any age. So again, thank you so much for being here and being brave enough to share your story, especially one like that you alluded to that we're going to talk more about substance abuse. And I feel like that's just something, it's very taboo. And a lot of people we've talked about kind of before the show started, my mom with cancer, it's a lot easier to be like, yeah, like cancer sucks, rah rah, let's go for a walk, all good things. But you don't see that as much. There's not as much sympathy out there for substance abuse. So I am just so grateful to dive in with you today, get to what was like as a kid, growing up, and also what you can kind of teach us for going forward. So I guess to back it up, the kind of first question is, when did your mom start? Is it correct to say start using, or what's the right phrase there?
Yeah. Oh, you could say using or abusing substances.
Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. So when did that? Well, how does the story start?
Yeah, so for as long really as I knew, my mom used substances. I was told that it kind of started on the night of my 10th birthday. I can't say that I
Mm,
remember it starting then, but I just remember really as long as I knew her, she was using substances.
really? So even before
Mhm.
10 years old, you knew like that was happening, or?
Well, I guess like maybe when I first became aware of it was probably when I was around like 12. So
Mm.
that's kind of like, I guess I would say as far back as my memory goes that I can remember about it. And that definitely tied into my parents' divorce. That's, why my parents got divorced in the first place. So, having a mother who was abusing substances and then also, your parents getting divorced, like though that's kind of a double whammy.
Yeah, boom, boom. That's
Yep.
tough. I'm so sorry. So, kind of going back to like that, you said 10, 12, young, impressionable girl. What was it like? What did you notice that you're like, oh, something's different about my life than it is about someone else's life?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of shame and embarrassment that went into it because I would hear from like some family members, like she would show up to book club acting really different. Like she would be, she'd sit down and be kind of like falling asleep and just acting really strange too. So definitely a lot of shame and embarrassment,
Mm,
in knowing, and I just knew like by the actions that I saw she was doing. That she was different from everyone else's moms. I would say, yeah, it was definitely like that shame and embarrassment that was very prominent for me as a kid, knowing that my mom was abusing substances and was going out into the world while she was under the influence.
I can't even imagine what that would have been like. And were there ever situations where you tried to confront your mom as you're starting to notice it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. And it's hard because when people are using substances, they can react in many different ways. And so sometimes, I would say, hey mom, like I'm really concerned about you. I'm noticing these behaviors and actions. How would you feel about getting some help? And she would kind of become defensive, where she would be like, oh, you don't love me. And so it was definitely like that, where I would try to speak to her and see if she would get help, but she took that as a way of me saying basically that I wasn't loving her, which, as we know, is
Mm.
was the complete opposite of what I was doing.
And as a young kid, I can't even imagine that dynamic of, like, this is my parents, and
Yeah.
I'm trying to do that. So, I guess, like, what would you say is kinda like a misconception, or something that you would like all people to know about kids who are growing up with parents who are abusing substances?
Yeah. I almost sometimes felt like I had a responsibility over my mom and like her using, but as a kid, that's not something you have control over, right? Like your parents have made the decision to use substances. So I think really just being gentle with kids who,
Hmm.
have parents who are abusing substances, because they don't always understand it. They may be feeling a wide variety of emotions, feeling confused, angry, disappointed. So I think maybe just to giving them the option to talk to you, if maybe like, hey, how are you doing? How are things going for you?
Mm.
Because I don't feel like I had too much of that. I felt like I really just had a lot of like, hey, I saw your mom and she was, acting like this, and just, like really internalizing a lot of that shame and embarrassment. So I
Oh.
think just for kids, allowing them to talk about it and share how they're feeling, because as we know, a lot of times, like internalizing feelings and then not sharing them can cause a lot of damage, not only physically, but like mentally as well. So,
Hmm. That is so, so good. Thank you for sharing that, and I loved what you said about those kids are carrying a very heavy weight,
yes.
and we don't need to add to that plate by making them
Right.
feel bad about anything that's happening in their life, and that kinda leads me to the question of, okay, so you've got, your mom's at home, and you're trying to get her help. She's not necessarily receptive
Mhm.
to that. How does the story progress from there?
Yeah, so there's there's definitely a longer story to it, but my parents eventually got divorced. I think I was like 15 or 16. I know I was in high school. And so my mom, my brother, and I, we moved into a house with my aunt, uncle, and their 5 kids. So there were a lot of us there. And then, so we would split the time between my mom's and my dad's. So thankfully, they were only like 10 or 15 minutes apart, really wasn't that far away. But lots and lots of people living at my mom's since we were with my cousins. And, it just didn't, in the end, it just kind of didn't really end up working out because there were a lot of like conflicts. And also, too, since my mom was still using, that was being seen in the house. And she was the type where, like I said before, she would go out when she was intoxicated, and she actually totaled a couple cars. And so
Mm.
I don't want to say she didn't have any regard for other people, but sometimes that's what happens, when you use substances. It's like you got to get that fix, and that's what's important. So then I think we were there for, oh gosh, I can't remember, maybe like a year to like a year and a half or something. And then I was old enough now to the point of where I could decide where I wanted to go. Whether it was my mom's or my dad's. And so she moved in with her boyfriend. And that's where she ended up staying until she passed away. So I stayed with my dad, and then I would occasionally go and visit her at her boyfriend's house.
Mm. Okay, that's good to know. And during that time, you mentioned the word shame a lot, and I'm
Hmm.
gonna just wipe my tears already because I know we're. I'm just gonna start crying at this. As you look back on that time, and whether it's you or any teenager that, again, your mom is going out and doing things, and people are talking, and you just
Yeah.
that shame, like you said, is there anything that you would tell a teenager experiencing shame over what their parents are doing, that would help them, or anything we could say to
It's
them?
hard because everybody, deals with that differently. I think maybe just tell them like, this is not a burden that you have to carry. You are not forcing your parent to use substances in any way, shape, or form. This is their decision. This is something that, they have. have to hold themselves accountable for and take responsibility for. So just know that, this is absolutely not your fault in any way, shape, or form. And also, too, that any way you're feeling is valid. If you are feeling angry, that's totally okay. If you're disappointed, if you're feeling embarrassment or shame, it's hard to take those feelings away and not feel them. So, just know too that however you are feeling is valid and there is absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Mm. Well, and you're I can tell you've got your master's in this, so I can't wait to hear all about your wisdom and some
Hmm.
little 101 stuff we're gonna get. So thank you for sharing that.
Hmm.
Thinking of like speaking to kids, I've heard from other people who've had parents suffer with substance. Um, they say there's sometimes this weird dissonance where they're upset, they're mad at their parent, but they also feel like they have to defend them.
Yeah.
And it's kind of this like weird thing where it's like you love them, they're still your parent,
Hmm.
and like it's just kind of this weird thing. So, did you ever feel like you had to defend your mom, or like how did that? What does that look like?
Yeah, I definitely feel there were times when I had to, like when people would tell me, like, hey, I saw her, whatever, at like book club or something, and I could tell she was under the influence. And, like my first like gut instinct was to be like, well, she has a problem. Like, of course, at first, it was a choice to pick up initially, but then it changes your brain chemistry and then you can't stop. And so, as a kid, I was like, well, but she has a problem. She can't help it. And so there, I would be like that sometimes, and other times I just wouldn't say anything. I would kind of just have it
Mm,
internally where I would, wish I could like say it to them telepathically instead of saying it out loud. So
yeah.
there was definitely that. Yeah.
And as far as like adults, or really anyone, but, especially adults who should, in theory, know better, but that's why we have shows like this,
Yeah.
and they're telling you this, and then I dealt a little to a much peanut-sized compared to what you went through degree with my ex-stepmom. She had a lot of mental health issues, and she very much, people she does not a crowd favorite, and it was
Hmm.
kinda awkward for us, and again, not my real mom. Like, right, like, it was a very, very peanut compared to what you're going through, but I remember kinda being in that awkward spot where I was like, "Yeah, what she does and, like, all of her issues, like, they're bad." Like, I'm not gonna try and sugarcoat it, but it's
Hmm.
also putting me in a weird spot to have to, like, gossip almost, or
Yeah.
I almost felt like it was this kind of this weird thing, and so to this like very small degree, like I remember feeling like I had to say something like, okay, well, but yeah, but she's still like a person, and like she's struggling
Yeah.
with mental health, and like I understand she's like not good, but so would you recommend in that sense, like people just don't try to, I don't know, use the word gossip, but it almost sometimes feels like it is. Do you feel like they sometimes separated you out and, like, they forgot you were her child when they would talk to you about her? Where they, like, dehumanize her in a way?
I don't know if they would dehumanize her, but I definitely think they would try to have like deeper conversations with me kind of about her. And I
Mm.
mean, sometimes it did feel like they separated, sometimes it was like, oh, that's Jill's daughter, instead of sometimes it's like, oh, that's Hannah, and because I feel like a lot of the time, when they would know that I was her daughter, that immediately, they would be like, oh, Jill is using substances, and so I would kind of be looped in with that, even though I had, nothing to do with
Yeah.
that and I wasn't abusing substances. So, excuse me. Yes, I definitely think so.
Hmm, and I feel like that's for all of us listening, I think that's a good thing to remember, like, these are still kids you're talking to, and I
Yeah.
don't get me wrong, I love a good story as much as the next person, but it's like, you gotta remember, like, don't put people in that, like, awkward spot where they have like,
Right.
try not to be a gossip mill, I guess is what I'm trying
Right.
to tell
It
everybody
and it doesn't
listening.
help make the child feel any better about it either. I feel like at least for me, it made like the shame and embarrassment a lot worse. So
Mhm.
yeah.
Right, and it's forcing anyone in that situation to almost act like a comrade or of an adult where you're like,
Yeah.
I'm a kid, like, I'm not 45, like, why are you talking to me like I'm
Right.
45 years old?"
Right. I'm
Um,
not mature enough for this yet.
I'm
So
not mature enough for this.
yes.
So
Yeah.
that is such good wisdom, so thank you for that, and to kind of lean in again, like, people would come talk to you. You've got this thing that, of course, is not the ideal situation. Um,
Hmm.
what are some, I mean, obviously, one of the questions that I guess I had is were there good moments throughout all of the abuse, like the substance abuse that we hear substance abuse and we just think like, oh, that's what it is 100% of the time.
Mhm.
But what was it like to have a parent using, but also be someone you love and have a relationship with?
Yeah, it was really difficult. It almost felt like, what is it, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? Because for a lot of people who abuse substances, they will have sober periods, where they are quote unquote more normal, where they're not using substances. And my mom was, like the best mom in the world then. She
Mm.
would take my brother and I out to lunch. We would jam to One Direction in her car. We would spend time together and it would be great. But unfortunately, like even at such a young age, I knew that wasn't going to last. And so I really did try to like soak up those moments that I had with her and like really hold on to those. I know it's a lot easier for us to kind of hold on to like those negative feelings and memories because they're so powerful. But I also was like, I really want to hold on to these good memories as well. And just remember that like I don't need to define her like by addiction, right? Like it's a part of who she is, but that doesn't mean that that's all that she is.
That is so beautiful. That's what makes you beautiful.
Yes,
Yeah, oh
exactly.
yeah, I feel ya.
That was
I'm
perfect.
there with ya. That is so.
Yes.
Oh, I love that you had some good weeks. I feel like that's a
Yes.
huge thing that I've had other people on the show kind of talk about. Like people just assume it's 100% bad all the time. That's not to dismiss the bad times that do happen,
Right.
but I think that's good for us to humanize people and be like, they're still
Yes.
parents and they're still trying like their hardest. So
Absolutely.
if they would have good periods, right? You and your mom, and
Yep.
then obviously that wouldn't last. So when things started to turn south, can you kind of walk us through your headspace as a child who's got so much hope and you want your parent to be healthy and kind of have these one direction car rides last forever. Can you
Mhm.
kind of just like walk us through your perspective and or at least other stories that you've heard of other kids like going through as they're watching their parents start to turn south?
Yeah, I know unfortunately from a young age, I developed I don't wanna say a negative attitude, but, definitely some negativity. So knowing like, yeah, we're gonna have some good times. However, this isn't gonna last. And then I
Mm.
remember too in a journal entry from one of the times that she was in the hospital. I think I like talked about how I was afraid she was gonna die young. And then after she passed away, I read that article, that journal entry, and I was like, that was not a wish, in any way, shape, or form, but it was a worry of me. And not to like throw a pity party or anything, but I definitely think I had more things to worry about as a child just because of her. I honestly sometimes
Mm.
would lay awake at night and be worried that she would like be out there um using and that she would, kill herself or somebody else unintentionally. And to have,
Yeah.
a young child, even like a teenager, worry about something like that, that's not something that teenagers should be, worrying about at that age. They should be, worrying about like school and like,
Boyfriends,
significant
yeah.
others. Exactly. And so I just like, I definitely feel like my childhood and like as a teenager, I definitely feel like it was different, at least in comparison to like my other friends at the time. Like their parents didn't abuse substances and they didn't really seem to have a lot of the same worries that I did.
Yeah, you had to grow up so fast and worry about
Yes.
things even most adults don't have to worry about.
Right.
For anyone who hasn't been touched by that, it's like that's not even on my radar, and
Yeah.
so I'm so sorry that you had to grow up so fast. And I guess as you've alluded to, the story, we kind of know how the story ends.
hmm
So can you kind of walk us through kind of where everybody was at leading up to it and what happened?
Yeah, so she actually was in a sober period when she passed away, as far as I was aware. I wasn't living with her just because of the addiction. I was trying to, kind of distance myself because I cared about her, but I also needed to make sure I was taking care of
Yeah.
myself. So, as far as I was aware, she was in a sober period. So I remember it was a Saturday. It was actually Saturday, February 25th, and I was going to get an oil change. I was in there like trying to give them my coupon. They're like, "Yeah, we don't take expired coupons anymore." I was like, "Okay, whatever." And I was about to leave, and I got a call from my aunt. And I think like everything is kind of a blur from there. But I believe she said, like, your mom is in the hospital. We're not sure if she's going to make it. Not really
Mm.
sure how I drove home because I'm pretty sure I like started bawling. But I told my brother and he drove us to the hospital. And then I like contacted my then boyfriend just to like let him know. He didn't answer, so that wasn't great at the time. But I remember then that we went into the like emergency room and my mom's boyfriend was there and he like hugged us and of like course I was a mess and everything. And she wasn't even in like an actual room yet. I think she was still like down in the ER and they were like working on her. And I just remember I was like by her side and I was like, freaking out and like bending over her because she was like unconscious. She went into cardiac arrest. And so just, from the time that I got the call from my aunt to like when she passed, a lot of it is blurry. And I honestly think
Mhm.
a lot of it has to do with like the trauma and my brain wanting to not have to think about it all the time. So absolutely a very, very traumatic moment for me, understandably. So yeah, I guess that's kind of like how it began.
Sure. Oh, I am so sorry. So you were getting an oil change, and you got the worst call no one ever
Yeah.
wants to get. Oh, I am
Yeah.
so sorry, and I know, obviously, as with any parent loss, there's so much, grief and
Hmm.
and everything that has to go through. Is there any you kinda mentioned earlier about, like, anger, and maybe wishing things that were different. So, again, my grief with, like, a cancer mom, all that stuff, and then yours. Like, is there anything, like, you wish people knew about grief from something with, like, substance abuse that's different than, like, a car accident or cancer?
I think it's because a lot of times with people who use substances, it's not just like a short-term thing. Typically, it's like long-term. People have been doing it for years. They'll go into recovery and then they'll experience a recurrence of use. So I think, it's just, I actually was thinking about this yesterday. I actually feel because a lot of times we can lose somebody like quickly or we can lose somebody like over a period of time. And I actually kind of felt like I lost my mom in both of those ways because I was losing her over a period of time with the substance use. And then it was all of a sudden when it finally was too much and it, took her body. So
Mhm.
I personally feel like I was kind of experiencing both of those, which
Yeah.
isn't a great experience.
No. No, it's not.
Yeah.
Oh, I am so sorry. Yeah, that just it sucks, and I 100% can relate to just a blur where you're like, "Did that happen?" And I just feel like there's periods in my life I just don't really know, and people are like, "Yeah, you remember Chuck E. Cheese." Was I at Chuck E. Cheese in 4th grade? I
Right.
don't know, like, I don't
Yeah.
know.
Mhm.
Um, so but thank you so much for sharing your story, and I guess before you just have such a wealth of wisdom, and I can't wait to pick your brain about is there any, like, last if you could sit down and kinda just, like, get on your podium and talk to all kids who are going kind of either they've lost a parent or they're kind of in the trenches right now of a parent struggling
Mhm.
with substance abuse, what would you say to them?
I would say, like first of all, so incredibly sorry for your loss. You did not deserve to lose your parent. Um and also don't be afraid to talk to a trusted adult if you feel like you need someone to talk to, if you're feeling sad or really any other emotion. If you want to share stories about your parents, please do that. That can help keep their memory alive. So just know that there are people out there who are willing and able to talk with you, and are willing to talk to you about the parent that you lost and your feelings too. So, don't be afraid to reach out for help.
Oh, that is so beautiful, and I know you and I can only imagine all the other kids who are kinda going through that, had to grow up very fast, and I'm sure, reaction of that is perhaps feeling like you have to hold it all together and you have to be the
Hmm.
strong one. So I just love your message about this goes for all of us, but especially people who can relate to your story about like it's hard and what you went through sucks. And there's like no
Hmm.
silver lining. It forced you to grow up
Right.
way too fast and take on way too much maturity and stuff that you shouldn't have to hold. So
Hmm.
thank you so much for sharing that. I think that's such a good reminder. And I love so much about your story is just how you are using your pain to help others. So I guess,
Mhm.
Miss Hannah, the last and kind of final couple minutes here, I would love just to pick your brain. Where did
Mhm.
you go to, like, what did you go to school for? And then what misconceptions do you think, like, through schooling, through your own experience, do you just wish to just punch out right now so that the world can hear your truth?
Yes. Okay. So first, I originally went to Concordia St. Paul for child learning and development because I thought I wanted to work with kids the rest of my life. I really enjoyed working with infants, still do. But my mom passed away actually when I just started at Concordia, and I kind of had like an aha moment. And I was like, I don't think I want to, work with kids for the rest of my life. Like I'll finish my degree because I do enjoy working with them. But I don't think it was actually until later, like after I graduated, when I was like, oh, I think I might actually want to work with people who have substance use disorders. So I finished out my degree with kids. And then, I think I saw something online about the U of M and having a addictions counseling degree. And so I was like, okay, might as well. So I applied for it was the College of Continuing and Professional Studies. So I applied for their master's program, and I checked like every single day forever. And I can't remember how long it took, but eventually there was like a decision has been posted, and I like went in immediately and saw that I got into grad school, and I was so excited. I was like, oh my gosh, yes. And it's funny because I never thought that I wanted to go back to school after I was done at Concordia, but then I like heard this idea and I was like, I want to go to school for this. And so, started my journey in addictions counseling. And I've met so many wonderful people during that time, people who are in recovery, people who, don't have a substance use disorder like me. We're called normies. um, they're all just wonderful people. And so just to have that experience of going to grad school, getting my master of professional studies, and then my license as an alcohol and drug counselor, like it was definitely hard. Like master's programs are difficult, but I would not give it up for the world. I learned so much, and I'm just so grateful that I had that opportunity. And now I can take my personal experiences and experiences from school and apply it to what I do.
Oh, I love that, and
Mhm.
congratulations, that is so exciting.
Thank you.
Uh, so if you had to just sort through, like, all that stuff, like, what are, like, the misconception that you're like, "Ooh, like, people need to know this about substance abuse?"
Yes. Oh gosh. There's probably so many, but I think the first one that comes to mind is like people who have substance use disorders are not bad people. Just because people, abuse substances, that doesn't mean that they're bad. It means that a lot of the time it does stem from trauma. So it could be that somebody doesn't have the coping skills that they need, or they feel like using substances was their last resort. And so just because people use or abuse substances does not mean they are bad people. It means that they have been in bad situations where they felt, they really had no other way out.
Mm, amen. I think you
Yes.
said right before the call, trauma is oftentimes the gateway drug, and I just think that
Yes.
is so powerful. It's like, what if we really just, like, looked at anybody struggling and say, "You know what? It's probably not their fault," and, like, gave people a little bit some
Exactly.
slack.
100%. And
Oh,
it's interesting because something that I learned the other day is actually addiction is a chronic, well, I knew it was a chronic disease, but somebody compared it to diabetes. Like you don't choose to have diabetes. People don't choose to have addictions, and you can have relapses with diabetes, right? Where things happen and you have relapses with addiction. So I feel like if the world thought of addiction as more like diabetes, where it is a chronic relapsing condition, I feel like the world would be a lot more accepting and there wouldn't be so much
mm.
stigma around addiction.
Yeah. Oh, well, I am so grateful for you, for all that you have shared with us tonight and all that you're going to be doing in the future. You are a wonderful speaker. I cannot wait to see all the lives that you are going to be shaping with your own work and all your other public speaking gigs that I know are ahead of you. So thank you so much for being here, for sharing your story, for sharing your heart. We are so grateful. Everybody listening, give Hannah a big thank you in the comments, and we will see all of you guys next week. So Hannah, thank you so much for being here.
Yes, thank you, Mickey.
Bye.
Bye.
Yay!